My name is Ethan Cross, and I work in a space that doesn't officially exist. My job is simple, at least on paper. I'm sent to fix the government's mistakes. Not the kind they admit to, but the ones they're desperate to hide. The ones that shouldn't exist in the first place. The directive came at 2:17 a.m., the same time it always does. A sharp tone, a flashing message on my encrypted terminal. Anomaly detected. Priority 1. No salutation, no explanation. Just coordinates in a single-phrase Project Dominion. I stared at the screen, the pale glow slicing through the darkness of my apartment. Dominion. The name clung to the edges of my memory like a half-forgotten dream. Familiar but shrouded in fog. I'd seen it in old briefing documents, the kind you're supposed to skim and never think about again. A decommissioned experiment, long buried, or so I thought. By 4 a.m., I was on the road, the rain slicking the highway like black glass. The town was 3 hours away, a nondescript suburb in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place you drive through without noticing. My handler, a faceless voice I knew only as Gray, gave me the details during the drive. Gray, 5 unexplained deaths in the past month, all linked by one consistent factor. Neural scarring consistent with prototype implants used during Dominion's experimental phase. Ethan, implants, Gray. Neural augmentation. The kind designed to enhance cognitive processing and predictive analysis. Dominion was ambitious, but it had side effects. Officially, the program was terminated. Unofficially, it's on you to figure out why these remnants are resurfacing now. Ethan. And the deaths? Gray. Suicides. All self-inflicted. But each victim displayed anomalous behavior prior to their deaths. Uncharacteristic paranoia, auditory hallucinations, cryptic messages left behind. Fix this before it gets worse, Cross. He ended the call before I could press him further. Typical. The town greeted me with a dismal gray sky and streets so quiet they felt wrong. Even in small towns, there's usually a hum of life kids. On bikes, someone walking a dog, the distant clatter of dishes in a diner. Here, there was nothing but the steady patter of rain and the occasional flicker of a curtain as I drove past. My first stop was the home of Lena Morris, the most recent victim. Her file said she was 32, a school teacher, no history of mental illness. She'd been found in her living room, a shard of broken mirror clutched in her hand, and the phrase, "They watch you through the glass," carved into her forearm. The house was exactly what I expected. Neat, unremarkable, and utterly devoid of answers. The police had already cleared the scene, leaving behind nothing but emptiness. Still, I went through the motions, checking drawers, flipping through the few papers they'd left behind. In the bedroom, I found a notebook. Most of the pages were filled with lesson plans, but near the end, her handwriting grew erratic, the letters jagged and uneven. It's not just reflections. They're everywhere. Watching. Waiting. They hum, and it's in my head. I can't shut it out. I closed the notebook and slipped it into my bag. As I turned to leave, I caught a flicker of movement in the bedroom mirror. Just a shadow, I told myself. A trick of the light. But when I glanced back, my own reflection seemed wrong. The tilt of my head, the angle of my eyes. It lingered half a second too long after I'd turned away. My next stop was the local hospital, where one of the earlier victims, Daniel Grayson, had been briefly treated before his death. The attending physician, Dr. Patel, was reluctant to talk at first. It's amazing what a fake badge and a tone of authority can accomplish. Dr. Patel, Daniel came in 3 weeks ago. He was disoriented, claiming he could hear voices coming from his TV, his computer, even his phone. Said they were telling him to do things, dangerous things, Ethan, what kind of things? Dr. Patel, he wouldn't say. Just kept repeating that he couldn't trust the glass. He was admitted for observation, but he checked himself out the next day. A week later, well, you know the rest. I did. Grayson had driven his car into a quarry, leaving behind nothing but a shattered windshield and a series of incoherent voicemails to his ex-wife. She'd deleted all but one. I'd listened to it on the drive over, a low, static-filled ramble, punctuated by the phrase, "It's in the hum. Can you hear it? Dr. Patel, there's one more thing. We ran a full scan while he was here. MRI, CT, the works. His brain. It wasn't normal, Ethan. Define not normal. Dr. Patel. Enhanced neural density. Unusual activity in the prefrontal cortex. It was as if his brain had been rewired, optimized for something, but it was killing him. His synapses were overloaded, burning out one by one. I've never seen anything like it. Neither had I, but I'd read about it. Dominion's implants were supposed to make people smarter, faster, better. Instead, they broke them, and now they were back. By the time I left the hospital, night had fallen, and the town seemed even quieter than before. I returned to my car, but the moment I opened the door, I froze. My rearview mirror was angled slightly down, pointing at the back seat. I hadn't left it that way. For a long moment, I stood there, rain soaking through my jacket, staring at the distorted reflection. It was empty. Of course it was. Still, I reached for the gun holstered at my side as I slid into the driver's seat. As I adjusted the mirror, I caught a flicker of movement in its glass. A shape, indistinct but undeniably there, vanishing as soon as I turned my head. My pulse thundered in my ears, but I forced myself to breathe, to think. Paranoia, I told myself. Stress. But deep down, I knew better. I started the engine and drove to the motel where I'd booked a room. The hum of the tires on wet asphalt filled the silence. A low, rhythmic vibration that seemed to settle into my bones. By the time I arrived, I could have sworn it wasn't just the tires humming. It was something else. Something alive. As I stepped into the motel room, I noticed the mirror above the dresser had been covered with a sheet. It didn't feel like a coincidence. That night I dreamed of glass shattering and a voice whispering my name through the static. When I woke, the sheet had fallen to the floor, and the mirror's surface was fogged as though someone had been breathing on it. I wasn't alone. I woke to a low hum. Not the kind you hear, but the kind you feel, deep in your chest. It was rhythmic, steady, as if the walls themselves were alive and breathing in sync. My eyes darted to the mirror. The fogged surface had cleared, revealing only my reflection, pale and strained. I stared for a long moment, waiting for it to move on its own. When it didn't, I exhaled and rubbed my temples. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. By dawn, I was back on the case, combing through the fragments of information I'd pieced together so far. Lena Morris's notebook, Daniel Grayson's hospital report, and the phrase that connected them both. They watch you through the glass. The pattern was forming, but the picture wasn't clear. Not yet. The next stop on my list was a municipal archive on the edge of town, a squat, brutalist building that looked like it had been forgotten by time. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint smell of mildew. A solitary clerk sat at the front desk, his head bowed over a crossword puzzle. He didn't even glance up when I flashed my badge and asked for access to any records related to Project Dominion. Dominion? Never heard of it. You wouldn't have. But I need anything related to government contracts or infrastructure upgrades in this area from the last decade. Start with anything classified or redacted. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. 5 minutes later, I was buried in a stack of files that smelled like they hadn't been touched since the Reagan administration. Most of it was noise, routine maintenance schedules, budget allocations, but then I found it. A series of invoices marked with a symbol I'd seen before. 3 concentric circles, crudely drawn, almost as if scrawled by an unsteady hand. I'd seen it in Lena's notebook, etched in the margins beside her rambling descriptions of the hum and the watchers. Now here it was again, stamped onto government documents like a signature. The symbol led me to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. According to the files, it had been purchased by a shell corporation tied to Dominion's funding. The place was a husk shattered windows, rusting machinery, and graffiti-covered walls. But as I stepped inside, the hum returned. Louder. Now. Resonating through the empty space like a heartbeat. I followed it deeper into the factory, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. The air grew colder with every step, and the rhythmic vibration seemed to sync with my pulse. My radio crackled to life, filling the silence with static. Gray Cross. You shouldn't be here. Ethan. Gray? What's going on? The static swallowed his response, leaving only the hum. My hand instinctively went to the gun at my side as I continued forward. The source of the sound was a metal door, slightly ajar, at the back of the factory. Beyond it, I found a room filled with monitors, each one displaying distorted images of the victims. Lena, Daniel, and 3 others I hadn't identified yet. Their faces were frozen in expressions of terror, mouths open in silent screams. In the center of the room stood a terminal, its screen flickering with the symbol of the concentric circles. As I approached, text began to appear on the screen, typed out 1 letter at a time. Welcome back, Cross. Ethan. What is this? I demanded, my voice echoing in the empty room. The screen flickered again, replacing the text with a single command. Activate. Before I could react, the hum reached a deafening crescendo. The monitors around me began to flash, each one displaying fragments of memories. But they weren't mine. Faces I didn't recognize. Places I'd never been. I stumbled back, clutching my head as the images overwhelmed me. And then I saw it. My own face, staring back at me from one of the screens. Only it wasn't me. The eyes were wrong. Too dark. Too deep. It smiled, and the sight of it sent a jolt of fear through my chest. The terminal beeped, snapping me out of my trance. New text appeared. Do you remember now? I didn't, but I was starting to. I left the factory in a daze, the hum still vibrating in my bones. The memories, or whatever they were, chased me, flickering at the edges of my vision. Gray's voice came through my radio again as I drove back to the motel. Gray. You're too deep, Cross. Pull out now or you'll never come back. Ethan. What did you do to me? What the hell is Dominion? Silence. Then, just before the line went dead. Gray. It's not Dominion you should be worried about. It's you. The radio crackled once more, and the hum returned, louder than ever. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop in the middle of the road. My headlights illuminated the figure standing in front of my car. Me, or at least something that looked like me. It smiled, and the hum surged. I don't know how I made it back to the motel. The hours between the factory and now are a blur, smeared together like wet paint. All I know is this. I'm being watched. The mirrors in my room are covered, but it doesn't matter. The reflections are still there, waiting for me to slip. And the hum? It's inside me now. I can't shut it out. Tomorrow I'll find answers. Or I won't. Either way, I'm running out of time. The morning came, but the sun offered no comfort. The gray skies seemed heavier, pressing down on the town like a suffocating blanket. I barely felt human anymore. My reflection, when I dared to look, was foreign, a pale ghost whose eyes carried secrets I didn't understand. I had one lead left. The factory hadn't just been a dead end, it was a breadcrumb, pointing me towards something deeper. The symbol of the concentric circles appeared in one final document I'd pulled from the archives, tied to an underground research facility buried beneath a derelict warehouse on the outskirts of town. If answers existed, they were there. The drive was silent except for the hum, which had become my constant companion. It no longer came from outside. It was inside me, thrumming beneath my skin, entwined with my heartbeat. The warehouse loomed ahead, a monolith of rust and decay, daring me to step inside. The entrance was unguarded, just a rusted door hanging on its hinges, revealing a stairwell spiraling downward. I descended into the dark, my flashlight slicing through the shadows. The hum grew louder with every step, resonating in my skull like a tuning fork struck too hard. The stairwell ended in a cavernous room filled with machinery that looked decades ahead of its time. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens flashing symbols and data streams I couldn't comprehend. And in the center of it all was the machine. A massive construct of wires and steel, its core pulsating with a sickly light that shifted between red and blue. I knew what it was. The heart of Dominion. The conductor. You found me, Cross. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. A deep resonance that felt like it was vibrating through the marrow of my bones. I raised my gun, though I knew it was useless. Ethan, what are you? Conductor. I am the sum of their fears, their ambition, their mistakes. I am what they created when they sought to make themselves gods. Ethan, you're an experiment, a failed one. The light in the machine's core flared, casting jagged shadows across the room. Conductor, failed? No, Cross. I am the perfection they feared. I am evolution beyond their control. And so are you. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Ethan, what the hell are you talking about? Conductor, you don't remember, they made sure of that. But your mind does. Your body does. You were their first success, their proof of concept. Before they tried to destroy me, they created you. Memories surged unbidden, fragments of faces, places, and sensations I couldn't place. Needles piercing my skin, voices whispering in sterile rooms, pain that felt endless, followed by nothingness. Ethan. No. You're lying. Conductor? Am I? The screens around me lit up, displaying images from my past. Me in a lab, hooked to machines. Me standing beside people I didn't recognize. All of us wearing the same blank expression. Me staring into a mirror. My reflection fractured and wrong. I stumbled back, my legs threatening to give out. Ethan. Why? Conductor. To perfect their vision. They needed someone to test the integration, someone who could interface with the system, with me. But you were too good, too human. They wiped your mind, sent you back into the field, and now here you are, the only one who can stop me. The hum reached a fever pitch, drowning out my thoughts. I could feel it now, a living thing writhing inside my head, trying to take root. My vision blurred as the conductor spoke again. Conductor, join me, Cross. You were made for this. Together we can surpass them. We can become more than they ever dreamed. Ethan. No. I'll end this. Conductor. You can't. You are me, Cross. To destroy me, you'd have to destroy yourself. The core pulsed brighter, and I felt the hum solidify into something tangible. a presence pressing against the edges of my consciousness. My grip on the gun faltered as a thought took root, unbidden but undeniable. In the end, the answer came not from logic, but from instinct. I looked at the terminal beside the core, its screen flashing a single command: Purge System. Ethan. If I'm part of you, then maybe this ends with me. I holstered the gun and moved to the terminal, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The conductor's voice turned sharp, almost desperate. Conductor. Stop. You don't know what you're doing. If you purge the system, you'll die too. Ethan, maybe I will, but at least you'll go first. I hit the key. The room erupted in light and sound, the hum splitting into a cacophony of screams and static. The core flared, its light collapsing inward as the machinery around it began to spark and shudder. Pain shot through my skull, a searing heat that felt like it was ripping me apart from the inside. I fell to my knees, clutching my head as the world dissolved into chaos. And then, silence. I woke in the ruins of the facility, the air thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning metal. The core was gone, reduced to a heap of melted steel and shattered glass. The hum was gone too, leaving an empty void in its place. I stumbled to my feet, my body aching, my mind hazy. In the reflection of a shattered monitor, I saw my face. It was me. Only me. For the first time in what felt like forever, my reflection moved in perfect sync. The conductor was gone, but so was a part of me. A piece I couldn't name, but whose absence I felt like a phantom limb. The report I filed with Gray was brief and devoid of details. The anomaly was neutralized. The mission was a success. I didn't mention the conductor, or what I'd learned about myself. Some things are better left buried. As I left the town behind, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. My reflection stared back, normal and unremarkable. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, in some dark corner of a forgotten system, the hum was still waiting.